Maya Carter started her day like any other, waking up to the soft glow of the morning sun streaming through the window of her small apartment. Her room was tidy, with books neatly stacked on her desk and a framed photo of her family on the nightstand. They had always been her source of strength, especially during tough times. Maya worked as an FBI agent, a job she was proud of but rarely spoke about. To her, it wasn't about the title, it was about the mission, standing up for justice and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Despite the challenges, Maya loved her work and carried herself with quiet dignity. That morning, Maya had an extra spring in her step. She grabbed her favorite blazer and headed to her neighborhood coffee shop before work. The air was crisp, the streets alive with the sounds of the city. She waved to her neighbors and smiled at the barista, who knew her usual order. "Morning, Maya. Caramel latte, right?" Josie, the cheerful barista, asked. "That's right," Maya replied with a grin. After grabbing her coffee, Maya walked toward her car, parked on a side street. She sipped the warm drink and hummed a tune, ready to take on the day. But as she approached her sleek black sedan, she felt eyes on her. A police car was parked nearby, and the officer inside was staring at her. His gaze wasn't friendly. It was sharp, suspicious, and cold. Maya tried to shake off the uneasy feeling, reminding herself that she had done nothing wrong. She reached for her car keys, but the officer stepped out of his vehicle. "Hey, you!" he barked. His tone was loud and commanding. Maya turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat. "Me?" she asked politely. The officer walked toward her, his hand resting on his belt. "Yeah, you. What are you doing around here?" he asked, his voice filled with accusation. Maya was taken aback. "I'm just heading to work," she said calmly, hoping to diffuse whatever tension was brewing. But the officer didn't back down. He eyed her car and frowned. "This your car?" "Yes, it is," Maya replied. She reached into her bag to pull out her registration papers. But before she could show him, the officer interrupted. "Step away from the vehicle," he demanded, his tone growing harsher. Maya's heart pounded. She had faced difficult situations before, but this one felt personal, unfair, and wrong. What happens next will leave you on the edge of your seat. Maya's story is not just about her. It's a powerful reminder of the courage it takes to stand up against injustice. If you believe in fairness, equality, and the power of speaking out, you don't want to miss how this story unfolds. Hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated with more stories that inspire and empower. Let's spread a message of hope and justice together. As the officer continued to question Maya, his voice growing louder, people began to gather. A few passers-by stopped, their curiosity piqued by the escalating tension. Some whispered to one another, while others pulled out their phones to record what was happening. Maya felt the heat of their stares and the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Sir," she said, her voice steady, "I've done nothing wrong. Please allow me to show you my papers." But the officer didn't seem interested in her words. "I said step away from the vehicle," he repeated, reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She had spent her life fighting for justice, but now, in this moment, she was the one who needed someone to stand up for her. Maya stood her ground as Officer Grayson loomed over her, his expression hard and accusatory. "Step away from the car," he barked again, his hand hovering near his belt. Maya raised her hand slightly, trying to show she wasn't a threat. "Sir," she began calmly, though her heart was racing, "I can show you my registration papers. Everything is in order." But Grayson wasn't listening. His eyes narrowed as if her words meant nothing. "Don't play games with me," he said, his voice dripping with suspicion. "This car doesn't belong to you." Maya's stomach dropped. His words stung, not because they were true, she knew they weren't, but because of what they implied. He wasn't questioning her because of any evidence. He was questioning her because of who he thought she was, a black woman who didn't look like she belonged in this neighborhood, driving a nice car. Maya tried again, keeping her voice steady despite the growing knot of anger and fear in her chest. "I've done nothing wrong," she said. "Please, let me get my papers." "I said step back," Grayson interrupted, moving closer. Without warning, he grabbed her arm, his grip rough and unyielding. Maya gasped in shock. She wasn't a stranger to tense situations. Her FBI training had prepared her for the unexpected. But this wasn't an investigation or a carefully planned mission. This was personal. "Let go of me," Maya said firmly, trying to pull her arm free. "You're making a mistake." The officer ignored her protests, yanking her away from the car. Maya stumbled slightly but managed to regain her footing. Around them, the small crowd that had gathered began to murmur, "Why's he doing that to her?" A voice from the crowd asked. "That's not right," another person said. A young boy clutching his mother's hand tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, why's the policeman being so mean?" he asked innocently. His mother hushed him, but her face was etched with concern. A man in the back pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is wrong," he said loudly. "She hasn't done anything." The murmurs grew louder, and Grayson's face darkened. "Move along," he barked at the crowd. "This is police business." But the onlookers didn't leave. If anything, more people stopped to see what was happening. Some crossed their arms, their faces stern, silently standing in solidarity with Maya. Maya looked Grayson in the eyes, her voice steady despite the chaos. "You're wrong about me," she said. "Check my ID, check my registration, whatever you need to do. But stop treating me like I'm a criminal. I have nothing to hide." Grayson didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his handcuffs. Maya's heart pounded. She couldn't believe this was happening. The crowd gasped as Grayson roughly pulled Maya's hands behind her back. Tears stung her eyes, not from fear, but from anger and frustration. She had spent her life upholding the law, and now here she was, being treated as if she had broken it. "Stop!" someone in the crowd shouted. "This isn't right." Maya's jacket slipped slightly as Grayson pulled her arms back. That's when it happened. As her jacket shifted, something shiny caught the sunlight. It was clipped to Maya's belt, a badge. Not just any badge, an FBI badge. The crowd fell silent. Grayson froze, his eyes darting to the badge and back to Maya's face. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Maya straightened, her voice firm and commanding. "You just assaulted a federal agent," she said, the authority in her tone undeniable. Grayson's face turned pale. His grip on Maya's arm loosened, and he took a step back, stammering. I didn't know," he began, but Maya cut him off. "You didn't care," she said, her voice sharp and unwavering. "You didn't ask questions. You didn't give me a chance to explain. You judged me because of how I look, and now you're going to be held accountable." The crowd erupted in murmurs again, this time with a tone of approval and support for Maya. The man recording with his phone stepped closer, making sure to capture every moment. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. With calm precision, she dialed a number. "This is Special Agent Maya Carter," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I need a supervisor at my location immediately." Officer Misconduct Grayson stood frozen, his face a mixture of fear and regret. The crowd watched intently, their phones still recording. The sound of an approaching black SUV broke the tense silence. As the vehicle pulled up, its tinted windows reflecting the sunlight, everyone waited to see what would happen next. The black SUV rolled to a stop, its engine humming ominously. The crowd parted slightly, their murmurs hushed as the door opened. A tall, imposing figure stepped out, a man in a dark suit with an FBI badge clipped to his belt. His expression was calm but stern, radiating authority. "Agent Carter," the man said, nodding at Maya. "Are you all right?" Maya nodded, her posture firm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm fine, but we have a situation," she replied, gesturing toward Officer Grayson, who now looked like a child caught red-handed. Grayson stammered, his face pale. "Sir, I didn't know she was an agent." "I thought you thought what the supervisor," interrupted, his voice cold. "You thought you could manhandle an innocent citizen without cause. You thought her appearance justified your actions." Grayson opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The supervisor turned to Maya. "Agent Carter, can you confirm what happened here?" Maya's voice was steady, though her emotions threatened to bubble over. "This officer accused me of stealing my own car. Despite my attempts to show my identification and registration, he ignored me, escalated the situation, and physically restrained me without cause. This was not law enforcement, it was abuse of power." The crowd murmured in agreement. "We saw it all," someone shouted. The man who had been recording stepped forward. "It's all on video. he said, holding up his phone. This officer grabbed her without reason. She kept trying to explain and he wouldn't listen. The supervisor nodded. Thank you. Please save that recording. We'll need it for our investigation. Grayson's jaw tightened, and he muttered under his breath, This is being blown out of proportion. Maya's eyes narrowed. No, it's not. You didn't listen when I tried to explain. You didn't care when I showed no signs of wrongdoing. All you cared about was what? You assumed about me. A ripple of applause broke out in the crowd. You tell him, someone shouted. A woman in the back called out, It's about time someone held these guys accountable. The little boy who had been watching earlier tugged on his mother's sleeve. She's so brave, he whispered. His mother nodded, her eyes filled with admiration. Maya glanced at the boy and smiled, feeling a surge of strength. She turned back to Grayson. You're not just accountable to me. You're accountable to every single person watching this right now. Grayson tried to salvage the situation. Look, I made a mistake. I didn't know who you were. If I'd known you shouldn't have to know who I am, Maya interrupted, her voice cutting through his excuses. You should treat everyone with respect, whether they're an FBI agent or a mother taking her kids to school. Your badge doesn't give you the right to disrespect or harm anyone. The crowd erupted in cheers again, their voices echoing through the street. The supervisor turned back to Grayson, his expression unyielding. Officer Grayson, your actions today were unacceptable. You'll be placed on administrative leave, effective immediately pending a full investigation. Turn in your badge and weapon. Grayson's face turned red with a mix of anger and humiliation. But, he began, but the supervisor held up a hand. No buts, the supervisor said firmly. You abused your authority, and you will be held accountable. This isn't up for debate. Reluctantly, Grayson removed his badge and holstered weapon, handing them over. The crowd watched in silence as the power dynamics shifted completely. Maya turned to face the crowd. Her voice was calm but carried a weight that silenced everyone. What happened today wasn't just about me. This is about fairness and justice. No one should have to feel afraid or powerless because of how they look. The man with the phone raised his hand. You're a hero, Agent Carter. You stood up not just for yourself but for all of us. Maya shook her head. I'm no hero. I'm just doing what I was taught, to stand up for what's right. But we all have a role to play. If you see something wrong, speak up. Use your voice. Use your phone. Together we can make sure that justice isn't just a word, it's a reality. The crowd erupted into cheers. Even those who had simply been bystanders moments ago clapped and shouted words of support. The little boy stepped forward, his small hand clutching his mother's. Miss, can I be like you when I grow up? He asked, his eyes wide with admiration. Maya knelt down to his level, her eyes softening. You can be anything you want to be, she said. And you can start right now by being kind, by being brave, and by standing up for what's right. The boy smiled and Maya ruffled his hair before standing again. The black SUV's door opened and the supervisor gestured for Maya to join him. Agent Carter, we'll file the necessary reports. Are you ready to go? Maya glanced back at the crowd. Yes, she said, but this is far from over. As she climbed into the SUV, the crowd broke into applause again, cheering as the vehicle pulled away. Grayson, now stripped of his badge, stood alone, his head bowed as he faced the reality of his actions. As the black SUV sped away from the scene, Maya sat in silence, gazing out the window. The crowd's cheers still echoed in her mind, but so did the sting of what had just happened. No matter how far she'd come, moments like this reminded her how much further the world had to go. The FBI supervisor, Agent Donovan, glanced over at her. You handled that well, Carter, he said, his tone professional but warm. Thank you, Maya replied, her voice steady. But this isn't just about me. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Agent Donovan nodded. We'll make sure of that. Grayson's actions today won't go unnoticed. His badge doesn't shield him from accountability. Maya appreciated his words, but she knew this was just one battle in a larger fight. Back at the precinct, Officer Grayson sat in a small, cold room, his hands fidgeting nervously. The same authority he once used to intimidate others now seemed to crush him under its weight. The precinct chief, a no-nonsense woman named Captain Lewis, walked in and placed a file on the table. "Grayson," she began, her voice sharp, "we've received multiple complaints about your conduct in the past, but this time, you've crossed the line." Grayson opened his mouth to speak, but Lewis held up her hand. "Don't bother with excuses. We've got video evidence, witness statements, and the direct account of an FBI agent. Your actions were unacceptable, and you'll be held accountable. Effective immediately, you're suspended without pay pending an investigation." Grayson's face turned red, and he muttered under his breath. But this time, there was no one to back him up. No badge to protect him. The next day, Maya sat at her desk at the FBI headquarters, drafting her report about the incident. She was thorough, detailing every word, every action, and every moment. It wasn't just a report. It was a declaration that abuse of power would not be tolerated. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from Agent Donovan. Subject: follow up on Grayson case. Grayson's suspension is official. Public pressure from the video is mounting. We forwarded everything to the district attorney for review. Well done, Carter. Maya leaned back in her chair, letting out a deep breath. Justice wasn't a single act. It was a process. But this was a step in the right direction. The video of Maya's confrontation with Grayson had gone viral. News outlets picked it up, and social media was ablaze with hashtags like Justice for Maya and Stand with Maya. People from all walks of life shared their stories of similar encounters, inspired by Maya's courage to stand up. One evening, Maya received an email that stood out. It was from the mother of the little boy who had watched the incident. "Thank you for what you did that day. My son keeps talking about you. He says you're his hero. You gave him hope that people can make a difference. I just wanted you to know how much that means to us." Maya felt a lump in her throat. This was why she did what she did, not for recognition, but to show people that change was possible. A few weeks later, Maya was invited to speak at a community event about accountability and justice. The auditorium was packed, the energy electric. Maya stepped up to the microphone, scanning the crowd. She saw faces of every color, young and old, all waiting to hear her story. She took a deep breath and began. "What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident. It happens every day, in every corner of this country. But it's not just about what happened, it's about what we do next." The crowd nodded, some clapping softly. "We all have a role to play," Maya continued. "Whether it's recording an injustice, speaking out when you see something wrong, or simply treating everyone with respect and dignity, change starts with us. Together, we can make sure that justice isn't just a word. It's a reality for everyone." The crowd erupted into applause, some people even standing to cheer. Maya looked out at them and felt a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Grayson's investigation moved forward. He was charged with misconduct, and his suspension turned into termination. The public outcry was too strong to ignore, and the precinct had to make a statement. Grayson's life took a turn he hadn't expected. The power and authority he once wielded were gone, and he was left to face the consequences of his actions. He became a symbol, not of strength, but of what happens when you abuse the trust given to you. Maya returned to her routine, but something had changed. She no longer felt alone in her fight for justice. She had a community behind her, people who believed in her and shared her vision for a fairer world. One afternoon, as she walked to her car, she saw a familiar face. The little boy from that fateful day ran up to her, holding a drawing in his hand. "I made this for you," he said, grinning. Maya unfolded the paper. It was a crayon drawing of her in her blazer, with the words "Hero Maya" written in big letters at the top. Tears pricked her eyes as she knelt down to hug him. "Thank you," she said. "You're my hero, too." The boy beamed, and Maya stood, looking at the world around her. There was still so much work to do, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. Maya's story is a reminder that standing up for justice takes courage, but it also takes all of us. No one should feel powerless. If this story inspired you, hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. The fight for fairness isn't over. Each of us can be part of the change. When you see something wrong, don't just watch. Speak up, record, and take action. Just like the man in the crowd with his phone. Just like Maya. Be the voice that demands accountability. Be the light in someone else's darkness. Be a hero. Like, subscribe, share. Because justice isn't a one-time event, it's a movement.